All right, everybody, welcome to Tesla Today. This is a topic I've been wanting to do for a long time now, and that's comparing Tesla with Apple. There was news today that India was asking Tesla to try to copy the Apple model of how they partner with suppliers. So let's talk about all the various things that Apple does, and does it make sense for Tesla to copy that as well? There is more news as well with Tesla securing more lithium and lots of other Gigafactory updates, as well as the Model 3 Highland. So stick around and let's have some fun. I've got Brian White with us. He is the host of My Tesla Weekend on YouTube. I highly, highly recommend you follow him there. Go there and subscribe after this show. He is just knocking out of the park. Every time I do a show with Brian on this show, it is highly, highly the audience just loves it and wants him more of him because he's full of knowledge. Thank you so much, Brian. Really appreciate you joining me every Wednesday.
I just love doing it, Herbert. It's great hanging out with you. You are one of my closest friends now, I think.
I, yes, that is so true at this point, right? We do this more for fun than we do actually just for work, like we were talking about. Okay, so let's get to work though. But let's get started here. So one of the big news that recently happened is, as everybody knows, following this channel, is that there is continuing to be more smoke around the concept of a Giga India. The latest is that India is now proposing to Tesla to follow Apple's model, which is pairing their Chinese suppliers, Tesla's Chinese suppliers. India won't let them come in to the country, but they want to say, hey, if you partner, if your Chinese suppliers partner with the Indian suppliers, then we'd be okay with that. So, Tesla, of course, has expressed interest in having some of its vendors from China set up operations in India. They need to do this because India does not yet today have an auto industry, but the Indian authorities have been kind of like, pushing back on that. They don't want to just grant approvals to just wholly owned Chinese companies. Because of course, the other complicating factor is that India and China, there's been border clashes between the two countries. And in fact, we reported just 2 weeks ago that BYD, a Chinese auto manufacturer, India denied their ability to come in, even though BYD promised was in joint venture with Mega, which is an Indian supplier. They actually denied that. So, as an alternative, the Indian officials are suggesting Tesla follow a similar approach to Apple, which is partnerships with the Chinese suppliers. What do you think, Brian? What's your thought about this? You know quite a bit about the supply chain concerns.
It's a fantastic idea all around. The idea is, Tesla has said, well, we want to be able to bring in our own parts from outside, and India is not a fan of that. We want the jobs here, we want the money here, and it's a bit of a misunderstanding. They're concerned that Tesla would say we're only going to be bringing in parts from outside the country. Tesla doesn't do that. They always source locally. It would be in the beginning, and I think they know that now. They're going to have partnerships there, but to assuage any concerns that Tesla might have, they're saying, look, you can work with Indian partners if you want, but if you really don't want to, if you really want a Chinese company, let them come in on one of these 50-50 joint ventures. You can have BYD as your battery supplier or one of those guys, but they need to build domestically, at least in a partnership. Is that good for Tesla? Is it bad for Tesla? It's good. There's no downside for Tesla. Tesla's going to vertically integrate as much as they can. They're going to keep as much of that money as they can. This isn't replacing that. This isn't saying you must buy headlights from an Indian company or an Indian-Chinese joint venture. It's saying that when you do, those jobs should stay in India. You should import as little as you can in terms of raw materials and finished parts, and keep the jobs here, keep the money here. There's no real downside for Tesla. They're not forced to do anything. This just creates, and really what this does is allows the Indian government to save face with the public. To just remind them, look, we're doing everything we can to make sure that Tesla does come and does bring jobs with them. Not just a factory, not just a tax dodge where they're avoiding the massive, massive import duties imposed on finished cars, which is 100% on affordable cars and up to 180% on premium cars. Double, triple the price of your car. That's why you don't see Teslas on the road in India. Very, very few of them. And this is, there's really no downside. And it
Yeah.
comes back to the integration.
Yeah, actually, I like what you just said there because it's just exactly right. This is just India saying, "Hey, we really want you to do this," but they're not going to force their hands on it. So you can see this another article that said this. It just says this line right here. In principle, if there's any critical parts vendor that needs to be brought in, it can be considered. Just no tax incentive can be given to any one company. So they're just saying, yeah, look, if you've got a critical vendor, we'll go ahead and still let that through anyways. So, yeah, it's going to happen. This is happening. It's looking really good. There's just so many conversations that are happening. And two Tesla executives are actually in India right now. We reported that yesterday. So
And while we're
this
on
is very exciting.
yeah, while we're on the Apple versus Tesla thing, Foxconn, Apple, I think they made a good decision at the time to let Foxconn build their phones. But over time, they realized it wasn't the panacea they may have envisioned. But even in retrospect, it looks good. Apple did not have proficiencies in building a high-tech factory. They would not have had the successes that they have now. They didn't have the competencies to get it done. And Foxconn tried to build factories in other places that didn't work, that weren't China, and it didn't pan out the way they had hoped. So they've got a lot of opportunities there to learn from those mistakes. So would those vendors even want to build in India? I think probably, but it would depend on guaranteed orders, and I'm just not sure how much of that would actually materialize. And yeah, there's going to be big opportunities to make money at this, and that's the reason I was looking at this a year ago. India has a domestic market of like 4.5 million cars, and you look at, well, that's not that big. I mean, that's less than other small countries, right? But India today is where China was 22, 23 years ago, probably 24 years ago. And it is an emerging market. Their middle class is beginning to develop. If we just focus on their 1%, we're still talking about, what is that, 12 million people a year is the 1%, 24 million for the 2%. It's a lot of people, and the middle class is emerging. India is a big market. And if you're Tesla moving in there, you've got basically a first mover advantage in EVs. There are EVs that exist. They're not very exciting or compelling, which is why you don't see them outside of India very much. But they can, boy, if this deal can be made to work, this is going to be as big as Shanghai in pretty short order. And especially if you can export from there, now you've got a right-hand drive export hub. There's a reason I made the video a year ago saying that Giga India makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Giga India makes sense. Actually, I'll pull that back. Giga India did not make sense for all sorts of reasons until just very recently. And you pointed some of that stuff out. But okay, let's stick to the concept of Apple model. And is there things that Tesla could do that are very similar to what Apple is? And right now, everything I think of, the answer is absolutely not. There's nothing that Apple's doing that Tesla should be doing, except for something like this, their presence in India. But you brought up Foxconn. So right now, Apple outsources almost all of the entire manufacturing of their products. They designed it in California, but then the rest of it is just built. They outsource manufacturing. Clearly, that's not Tesla's model. Tesla is a manufacturer first. You are the most aware of their gigafactory expertise. And in fact, they've said that the factory is their product and they're making that so efficient. I mean, I don't think there's anyone in the world that can say that they can manufacture better than Tesla today, right? So that's an
Absolutely.
obvious crazy thing to say Tesla should do what Foxconn does. Um, the second thing that Tesla does is, or Apple does, is the App Store. So I wanted to ask you, should Tesla do an App Store? But there's a different model. So I just did an interview with Connecting the Dots, and he said that Apple made a massive mistake, believe it or not, even though today they're the biggest company in the world. They created an app store, but they let go of money on the table because they decided to focus and not build Airbnb app. They did not build the Uber app. They just let other companies who are now massive on their own to build this. So that's not what Tesla's necessarily going to do because they're so big into innovation and virtual vertical integration. So what do you think, Brian?
So first of all, Dots is a very sharp guy. Love his channel. He does great work. The in hindsight, it's a lot easier to predict the past than the future. Apple absolutely left money on the table. Their reasoning at the time is we don't have the resource to build these out. We don't know what things to build out, and there's not going to be. We need to make it appear as though we're creating this ecosystem, which they were, for everyone to have room to prosper. If you look at Airbnb, their profit is what, somewhere between inconsequential and negative. Uber just posted their first profit. They're I don't know how much smarter or better these companies could have done this. And Tesla's approach is, at least, they said they were going to open up their app store years ago. And I suppose in some sense they did, but it never really developed because I think, like you said, they're trying to keep as much as they can in-house and they haven't had the bandwidth to deal with it since then. So is there going to be a native Uber app in Tesla? I think the answer is no. I think they're going to wait for their own robotaxi network to deploy that. Now, you could still use your Tesla on the Uber network, but it wouldn't be a native sort of situation. And there would be, I'd love to take, 10% or 20% or 30% of whatever it is you're charging people. But what I'd really love to do is keep all the money instead. And this would be like if those giant shipping companies of previous centuries also owned the farms and the railroads. And in some cases they did, and they did so because then they controlled 100% of the profit and also bore 100% of the responsibility for making sure it worked. How many times have you in your business life had a problem where a deal fell apart or some critical situation arose that was out of your control? It's still your problem, even though suppliers upstream that you cannot control made very simple, very stupid mistakes. And this is something where you could control the entire process as well as the entire revenue stream. I think that's what Tesla's looking to do.
Yeah. There's a debate that's going on in Tesla Twitter community this morning with Gary Black suggesting that Tesla buy Uber. This has been brought up a while back, and we can do a whole show on this. It doesn't make sense to me. Of course, if they think that they should buy it, they will, but it really doesn't make sense. It's amazing how much data Tesla already has with 4 million cars driving around in every major city. They track more data than anyone else does, including Uber. And like you said, they're gonna just they're an innovation company, they're a software company, Tesla. So they don't need to outsource this to some other company. And I'm just struggling to understand what the benefits are. Certainly Uber's known as the ride hail company, but that I don't know how big of a deal that is. Maybe
And look at what
globally,
Uber would
yeah.
cost. The market cap is such that buying Uber, you'd be paying such a premium over just getting it yourself. And as the reason Elon chose to buy Twitter instead of create his alternative is new entrants in social media have not succeeded in a very long time. There is brand loyalty within Twitter or X, if we're calling it that, or Facebook or whatever, where with ride sharing, if somebody comes along and they're 30% cheaper than Uber and every bit as good, at 30% cheaper, they could be half as good, and I would still pick them in anything but a time critical situation. And very quickly, we've seen with Tesla products, they go from brand new and a little rough to awfully, awfully good relatively quickly and seamlessly, painlessly. Behind the scenes, you don't even see it. So yeah, I believe that for Tesla to run their own ride-sharing app, their data is very good. For people who've never owned or driven in a Tesla, they don't see what you see when you're in the car, especially road tripping. So I just got back from the California takeover. John and Kelvin put on one world-class event. Next year, it's going to be even bigger. I'm confident because, wow. On the way there, on the way back, when you put in your destination, we're going just north. Just take me, back all the way home. It says, okay, here's the map. Here's a circle showing all the superchargers you can reach today, right now. And you look at it and you pick and I'm going to do this one. It goes, okay, here's, if you'd like to see the analytics, here's a chart that shows what your power consumption for this drive should be. And you can gamify it. You can go a little more chill and get more green on the chart. If you've got a headwind and it'll tell you, oh, you do have a headwind. You'll see that it's
Wow.
under it. The data is so rich and so deep.
Yeah.
And we're having a conversation about it. I was talking with Ken, who was saying, well, yeah, of course it's good. They have all this data. I'm like, right. Everybody could have the capacity to do something like this. Tesla actually does it. So when it comes to making these back-end systems that work in software, in automotive, nobody has this kind of competency. And it's just stunning to see the degree of execution and how well it works.
Yeah. And to just put the nail on the head about the Uber concept, it's actually a bad deal because Uber's known as the brand, as the ride hail for human drivers. And it's all about their big deal is that you've got these driver network and you don't want to be known for human drivers. It's going to have to change the mind of people that I'm ordering an Uber, but no, now this one is it's robotaxi. No, it's completely wrong. Okay. We probably should talk briefly about buybacks. Apple does buybacks. That's the reason why their stocks rose really fast in the last 10 years. And it's massive buybacks. We're talking $20 billion. Now, of course, I'm a fan of buybacks, but not necessarily now. And I don't necessarily need it now. The reason I am is because I'm a Tesla investor. If I'm an investor in a company and they do buybacks, it's a guaranteed way for the stock to rise, like significantly, because you're reducing the shares outstanding, you're raising the earnings more than it would normally be, and you have extra cash that you don't need to spend even after all of these R&D, all the robots and energy and gigafactories. There's so much cash that's going to be flowing in. You can't. Today, they just reported that Tesla is putting money into CDs. and because they need to, you have extra cash, you need to put it somewhere. These are long-term CDs, like 10-year plus. So why not do buybacks, which you can reverse it anymore? Now, the thing about Apple was they did the buybacks when they had $120 billion in cash on hand already. And that's when they started thinking about it. So Tesla has 23. They don't have to do it now, but boy, if they did, I'd be all for it because I'm going to get my stock rising quickly. So the answer is don't do it, Tesla. But if they do, fine.
And I agree with all those points. If you look though, Facebook did a lot of buybacks and did not and then went down, but they would have gone down more had they not done it. Yeah. Buybacks make sense when you have significantly more cash on hand than capacity to deploy it. Apple with $120 billion, what are you going to spend it on? They're not building factories. They're not, you could buy any company you want without it making an appreciable dent in the balance sheet. Now with Tesla, 23 billion sounds like a lot. It's really not. It's really not.
Not
That's
quite yet,
what,
there. Yeah.
4 or 5 factories. They're spending $1 billion in R&D on Dojo alone. That's great. But buybacks are, the day will come. The day will come. But at that point, it might be a $2-3 trillion company. And even still, in our lifetimes, they could buy back the majority of the shares. It would be breathtaking to see. And we will get there because at some point, this turns into a cash printing machine.
It is a cash printing machine now. And it's just going to be like exponential. Oh, God. I'm so excited.
Tesla is not the next Toyota. Tesla is not the next Apple. Tesla is the next Dutch East India company.
Yeah. It's crazy. I love it. I'm so excited about Tesla. It's just crazy. And I love the fact that the financial standing is so strong and we've got so many things to do. Okay, let's move. We got some other news to cover. So this is not that big of a deal, but U.S. Senator visited Giga Texas, met with Elon. So this is Senator John Cornyn, and he is a Republican senator that's been a senator for 20 years. And he's a attorney who became a judge, Supreme Court of Texas. And he said, everything is bigger. Oh, he's a senator for Texas, of course. Everything is bigger in the Lone Star State, the second largest manufacturing facility in the U.S., Gigafactory Texas, employs 10,000 Texans.
I'm curious how he's coming up with second largest facility. What facility would be larger? I wonder. Certainly, it's the largest single building for manufacturing in the world. But all right. In any case, it's a very big number.
Yeah. Then he tweeted this out. We talked about AI, supply chains, critical minerals, SpaceX, and China. No shortage of important topics to discuss. Anything here that is of interest to you?
Yes. It is important that our legislators have some understanding of what's going on. You've seen bills to crack down on things like email spam. That took forever. And the reason was because the people in charge of making the laws weren't using email yet. They had no understanding of how big the problem already was 20 years ago. Same with like the do not call list. If you're never at home and you have someone who handles all your phone calls, you don't understand how frustrating robocalls can be because it doesn't impact you personally. And then all of a sudden they all get cell phones and realize this thing is ringing off the hook all day. Let's address it. The Senate and Congress and all your representatives can't effectively legislate things that matter to the future, like Tesla, like the supply chain, the minerals, all that. They can't effectively legislate it if they don't understand it. He gets in there and I imagine he was just there for publicity or for fun or because he wanted to be there. And Elon said, "Hey, while you're here, we need to talk about minerals. Do you know how hard it is to get mining permits, refining permits, buildings built?" And the senator he's in a position to help open up mining, to streamline permits and approvals and get these shovels into the ground. And Elon's able to say to him, look, China is around the world refining and mining these minerals, and they're eating our lunch. We can bring these jobs home today. We're already building a facility that will refine. There are permits pending in several states to get these critical minerals right here. I need you in my corner. And it sounds like that's what he got. Is maybe Ford is pulling strings to try and get people like this on board, but it doesn't feel like they are. What they're doing is saying we need protectionist policies, and Elon is saying we need good policies that help everyone, because if it helps everyone, it's going to help us the most because we're the best at it. So I think this was an opportunity that Elon saw where he had a senator willing to come in and just say hello, glad hand, get some pictures. And he seized the opportunity and said, look, here's the pressing issues. And I know that you have some capacity to bring attention to them and get them done.
Yeah. It's so many different points here, but obviously there's a lot of people who are enemies of Tesla. It's big auto, big oil, multimedia, politicians. But on the other hand, everybody seems to want to meet with Elon. He gets to speak to the world leaders. So anytime he speaks to a world leader like this, it's great. I mean, he's not a world leader, but he's a top up there. And the topics that they're talking about is crazy. I mean, we're talking AI, critical minerals, SpaceX, China. These are the big ones. Okay, so that's great that happened. Small thing, but some other things are happening that are showing that possibly the Highland Model 3 is absolutely moving forward. So in the last earnings call, we did have Elon talking about a slowdown in the factories because they're retooling it, possibly because of Model 3, possibly for something else. But so here's some more signs. The Fremont factory, they resume filing building permits. Now, this is the part I wanted to ask you, Brian, because I was a little confused. So in last week, we reported that the Fremont factory had a 1 week stoppage. That's great. So today, what they're reporting now is they're filing more building permits, right? So why why didn't they file that earlier? And the permits is demolition of existing equipment, installation of new equipment, which is the same kind of permit they've received before. So why? What's going on? Why is it like they paused it, then they have to file even new permits now?
So it's all about agile construction. We see this a lot in Texas. We see it less so in Shanghai and Berlin. In Shanghai and Berlin, the amount of rework that's been done has been very limited, where in Texas it's been a lot more substantial. We still see it in every facility, but not as much. The way Agile construction works in this case is I wish to do this. It's going to take us 3 months to get everything exactly right to file for a permit, but we want to start construction in 3 months. So they'll file preliminary permits, even if they're not going to be right, just because they'll be close. And getting a revised permit is quicker than a fresh one from scratch. So this isn't bad news. This is really no news. This is just how they do it. And they're getting it all submitted early and submitted often, which can be a little bit of a headache for the permit office, but that's their job. That's what they supposed to be doing. So that's great. They're going to have, but yeah, then the question is, are we talking whole buildings or are we just talking parts of the line? And at least in the case of these permits, it doesn't sound like whole buildings so much as equipment within the buildings, which is absolutely what Highland is about. It is absolutely about, on the surface, the car may look as similar. Well, it won't look as similar as the old S to the refreshed S. It's going to look more different than that. But under the skin, we're going to have a whole lot of different big improvements. We're expecting the castings to be a thing. And we've seen that over by where they do the castings, there's a foundation excavated. They've already started pouring for that. There's going to be more casting machines in Fremont. That's what are those for, if not Highland? And the demolition of equipment and and replacing it with new equipment, again, that's all going to be Highland stuff. So the question is, how quickly can they get it in and done and running again? And that's the big question mark that is going to make estimates for this quarter pretty difficult, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's good news. Fantastic news. First of all, it's happening at the beginning of the quarter. It looks like it's moving, maybe a pause, but it seems to be happening. There's new sign as well that Model 3 is going to be, the Highland's going to come soon. The other new news that came out today was the delivery dates when somebody wants to buy a Model 3 in Europe, it's being pushed back to January 2024 now. So if you decide to buy a Model 3, it's being pushed back. It looks like the Model 3 rear wheel drive is October, November. Model 3 long range is October, November, and then the Model 3 performance is November to January. So this is again another signal, right? But possibly it's coming. What was your takeaway?
Wow. Why would they announce that Model 3 is no longer going to be customized for order in Europe? It's almost as if they're shutting down the production line to do something significant and they're unsure of how long it will take to get it back running again.
Associated with the Model 3.
What could that mean? I wonder. And there are still people saying, "Oh, Highland 3 refresh isn't coming." And if you're watching people who are saying that that's a thing, you really need to reevaluate your sources on that, because it's real. It's 100%. I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing here? So that's exciting. January 2024 might be a little overly pessimistic, just setting expectations, because if you set a date and you come in 2 months early, you're the hero of the world. But if you set a date and miss it by a week late, you're the villain. So it's managing expectations. That's something I believe Tesla has gotten a lot better at over the last 4 years, certainly over the last 5 years since Semi and Roadster were unveiled. They will, this is evidence that it's moving forward.
And the good news is that if they pushed back the delivery dates to October, right? October. So it's already August now, and it's coming in a couple months then, if this is to be believed, because some people were saying that it might happen next year, and it's looking like it's actually going to happen probably in September. They'll probably announce it in September. So very big news.
It is big news, and they will. Yeah, very big rumor. All the pieces are there. You just gotta step back and cross your eyes like a magic eye to actually see it. And this doesn't mean Highland will not arrive until December. This means the number of local deliveries they could make of this model will surely outstrip as many as they could build between now and the end of the year. And it does take time to ship. The logistics are, it's going to be a good at best 30 days from the time it rolls out your door to the time it gets to your customer. And they especially with any amount of downtime on the line to keep the numbers looking good because Wall Street is so fickle. I think when Highland comes out from Shanghai, it will be only local
So,
deliveries until the following quarter.
Brian, when are we going to hear that Giga Berlin is slowed down? Or is that the news that we reported a month ago that one of the lines were slowing down?
No, no. Berlin is the opposite. They were adding lines 2 and 3, and those
Okay,
should be coming
right.
up. The only thing we
Gotcha.
heard was
They're
that there
adding
were
line.
some temporary workers who had been hired, temps
Okay.
who had been let go. And of course, the negative Nancy's had to latch onto that and say, oh, they're laying off. The end has finally arrived, just as we've been predicting every week since 2012.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I'm very, very excited. I'm looking forward to Model 3 just growing in terms of their sales to kind of even maybe, catching up to as close to Model Y right now. It's just not as high. Okay. Some big news about Tesla securing more lithium supplies. So we've got here Tesla extended their agreement with China's Yahua Group until 2030. So they already had an agreement with them that they signed in 2020, and that went from 2021 to 2025, and now they've extended that to 2030. So that's just another great signal. They're always signing long-term contracts. Tesla is always going to be the lead dog here. Companies will want to partner with them because it's almost a guaranteed sale at this point, and they're going to be able to make sure that that works well. Um, and then just this bit of fact here that from 2023 to 2030, the lithium supplied is expected to be between 207,000 tons to 301,000 tons. Though those numbers mean anything to you, to me they're just numbers. But
No,
what
they're
does it mean
just
to you?
it's just big numbers. And it looks like when they're saying, yeah, and that's the raw material, not the finished material. 300,000 tons of finished material would be too much on account of there only being like 50 kilograms in a car, something like that, of refined material. No, it's just big numbers. It's just good news. And like you were saying, Tesla is the buyer of preference for these because we know they're going to just keep going full steam, where other manufacturers really keep pulling back on their announcements. GM had their best-selling car, their best-selling EV, the Bolt, and they canceled it because Tesla dropped price on the 3, and now they were only a few $1,000s apart. And the Bolt, they could not afford to cut the prices anymore. They were already deeply negative on it, so they just had to cancel it entirely. But Mary, the indisputable leader of the EV industry, and it matters, said, we're going to bring it back. We're going to bring back the Bolt. And there was much rejoicing. But the rejoicing was premature because she added, we're going to build it on our Ultium platform in-house. That's not the same car. That's a different car with the same name. This will allow them to get better pricing because they won't be paying the middleman LG. It'll also make their numbers look better because when you buy something that LG designed, the price that you pay for it shows up as cost of goods. If you design it yourself, all that R&D shows up as CapEx. It goes onto the long-term sheet instead. It looks better on paper, even if it ends up costing slightly more or the same. The hope is that it would cost less. So the lithium, the long-term contracts, you know who's going to buy it, who's going to definitely come through on their orders, and it is Tesla. So yeah.
More news about lithium. I wanted to ask you this question because I've reported on
Mm-hmm.
this already, but Exxon is really making a big deal about them getting into lithium supply, and they're in talks with Tesla, Ford, and Volkswagen so that the Exxon can provide them with lithium. And the talks are in early stages right now. Both Exxon and Volkswagen, well, nobody's talking about it, but here's the number. Exxon has set a target of extracting 100,000 tons annually. So they want to get into this. What do you think, Brian? What's some people are saying that Exxon doing this, they're actually nefarious about it. They're going to try to, capture as much lithium as possible and then control it and not let it out so that they can manage their business. Or is this a real deal? Good news for the world.
Sure. So I understand the cynicism behind it. Exxon is a dastardly company and they've got a terrible track record. But trying to monopolize lithium would be like trying to monopolize all charging while we have charging at home. Getting a 10-acre site in Arkansas is a drop in the bucket, or rather, a drop in the ocean, because you can also refine it from ocean water. Then you've got lithium exists everywhere. They couldn't corner the market if they tried. It would require all the land in the world, essentially.
Okay, good.
Exxon, do we want Exxon to die? Well, maybe. Some people for sure, with all the things they've done knowingly to cause harm. But Exxon is not going to die. They have too much money. They have too much revenue. They have too much profit. Would you like, if given the choice, would you rather have them involved in the green transition or not, knowing that they're going to be around either way? When you extract oil, you use it once, it's burnt and it's gone. When Exxon extracts lithium and it gets into the hands of Tesla or LG or Panasonic, it is now in a supply chain that has an almost closed loop. That lithium will remain in the supply chain indefinitely. Now, it might take 10 or 20 years before it hits a recycling center because the batteries have such a long usable lifespan. Even after they've exited the car, they go into stationary storage. They can go into emergency battery backups. Japan uses old Nissan Leafs, not even the batteries, just parks Leafs to use as emergency power in case of tsunami or earthquake. And the lithium is getting into the supply chain, and once it gets in, it doesn't come out. And Exxon is just looking for another revenue stream, and they have always been able to read the writing on the wall, regardless of whether or not they're willing to admit it.
Yeah. JB Straubel, who's now the board member of Tesla, who's running Redmond Materials, which is one of the leading recycling of minerals. And he has said that lithium and other elements, these things are they can be reused indefinitely, and it's much easier to take a battery and get the minerals out of that instead of doing the mining. So once it's mined, then they can just either reuse the battery itself or take out the minerals and restart again. But it's so much cheaper than doing that, and it can be reused forever, which is carbon, oil, burned, gone, atmosphere, never retrieved. Okay, a couple quick news that we can cover before we end here. Tell me about this. So Plaid has arrived, Model S and Model X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these have made it to Hong Kong, and this is still going on even for the Models 3 and Y. Y has only just recently entered Korea with thousands and thousands of sales in orders placed on day one. But the Plaid, the Model S and X the sales are not what many had hoped they would be on the refresh. But then again, the refresh wasn't quite as refreshing as many had hoped. But there are still more markets into which they're going, and it's still expanding.
Gotcha. And small numbers for us. Okay, here's another fun bit of news. So this guy named Jared, he reported that Tesla still installing Magic Docks, and they installed one in Fort Worth, Texas. He spoke with the installers, and it's unofficial for now, but there's a Magic Dock in this supercharger. And what they do apparently is they have a rental for an F-150 Lightning, and they can test to see. So this is a Magic Dock that lets non-Teslas charge at Tesla superchargers. And this is before, of course, before the supercharger partner. So now Ford has partnered this way. You don't necessarily need this Magic Dock anymore in the future. With the Ford F-150, will actually have the NACS standard that allows any Tesla to be able to plug in directly into them. But that will be the future vehicles, 2025 and onward. But for now, this is still happening.
Yeah, and this is another, like you said, small bit of news. This is a dead end, but even Google Street View drives the car all the way down the dead end. You got to get there and get the picture. And this will help a few people in a few places, and it's a very cheap program to implement for Tesla, because all they need is a small crew and a handful of these very cheap to manufacture pieces in order to enable it. And this is also a good test for the system, because this is like a soft launch. You get cars coming in using the Magic Dock to connect to the Tesla network. You can test and trial and troubleshoot 2 years before these cars are going to be coming out with their own native chargers. So it's going to be a nice low volume, lightweight situation in which to iron out all the difficulties of providing services for all these different manufacturers using all these different parts, many of which may not be well understood until you actually get connected.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. Fun episode. We covered Giga India, lots more news there. I bet that will be signed before the end of this year, given the fact that there's just so much movement. Tesla is securing more lithium supplies, and just things are continuing to move forward. Thank you so much, Brian. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Herbert.
See you, everybody.